We're talking today with Doug McVay of Vero Beach, Florida, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Doug, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Monticello, Iowa, December 18th, 1949.
Okay. What part of Iowa is that in?
That would be eastern Iowa.
Okay, so closer to the Mississippi as opposed to...
About an hour from the Mississippi.
Okay. Now, did you grow up there, or did you move around?
I lived there in Monticello till grade school, then we moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I went to junior high and high school in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Okay. And what did your family do for a living while you were growing up?
My father was originally a farmer, so we grew up on a farm as kids.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved into town, Cedar Rapids. My father got some factory jobs and eventually became a Teamster and drove a cement truck for the Teamsters Union.
Okay. And did your mother stay at home, or did she have a job?
My mother was on the farm until we moved to town. Then she got a job at Rockwell International. At that time it was Collins Radio, and she worked there.
Okay. And then did you finish high school?
Yes, I graduated from Washington High School.
Okay, and what year?
1968.
Okay. And at that point in time, how much did you know about Vietnam and what was going on in the world?
Well, I read about it. It was on the news, and that was about it. Didn't pay any attention to it. I didn't understand the ramifications of it. I just knew it existed and it was there.
Okay. And what did you do after you finished high school?
Well, I wanted to go to college, so I went to Kirkwood Community College for the first year, and then when that first year was over, I took summer school, and when I was in summer school is when I dropped out and joined the Army.
All right. So why did you do that?
Bored. I was in typing class. I was looking around, and I said, I don't want to do this. And I said, and 5 or 6 of my friends came in one day and said they're all joining, and so you want to go? And I said, well, okay, it sounds good. And not thinking about it, not putting a lot of thought in it, being 19 years old, why not? So we all enlisted.
Okay. And so when did you enlist?
It would have been August of 1969.
Okay. Once you've enlisted, now what happens to you?
I enlisted. I went to Fort Dodge, Des Moines. We all gathered there. Then they sent me to Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Okay. Now, had you had a draft physical already, or did you get a physical at Fort Dodge?
I got a physical at Fort Dodge.
Okay. Now, when you were there for the physical, were the other people there enlistees, or did they have draftees?
It would have been both. They had draftees, enlistees. Everybody was there.
Okay. Now, some of the stories that go around are things that show up in movies about Vietnam, is that these physicals, people try all kinds of games and scams to avoid having to go in. Did you notice any of that there?
No, I did not notice any of that.
That's why we asked.
The doctors were looking at me, though, and they said, do you want to go? And I said, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing any better, I said yes.
Okay. Because that is, at that point in time, they still needed a lot of people. All right. So now, Fort Polk, Louisiana, that's for basic training initially?
Basic training, infantry training.
Yeah. Okay. So how do they get you down to Fort Polk?
We flew down in a prop plane, and it was quite a ride. I remember waking up on the ceiling of the plane because they hit an air pocket and we were sleeping, and our heads were up on the ceiling, and the propellers was like shattering our eardrums. It was interesting.
Now, was that a military plane?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
All right. And what kind of reception did you get at Fort Polk?
They loved us. They treated us really good, and they let us sleep all day and all that kind of stuff. No, we got there and they started inducting us into the Army. We got our uniforms, and then they assigned us to where we were going to go.
Now, did the discipline stuff start right away, or did they take was the processing a little over a key first?
I think the first week it was a process, but coming from a 19-year-old boy in civilian life, getting you up at 4:30 in the morning, and that type of thing. It was quite a change, quite a shock to the system. So, but it wasn't as bad as it got later. But they were working on it.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then, at the point when you enlisted, were you given any opportunity to select what kind of training you wanted, or did they just?
Yes, you could pick it, but they said unless you enlist for 3 years, you're not getting any guarantee. I signed up. I want to go to pharmacy school, and so I didn't get that, but I asked for it.
Right. Okay. So you're going. So once the actual training cycle begins, now what are you doing?
Well, I'm in basic boot camp, and they're just getting us up in the morning, march us around. We sit in class during the day, and you go through, the different training cycles and that type of thing.
Okay, but a lot of the people in the audience here might not know anything about what that is, because less than 1% of the population goes to the military these days.
Okay.
So, in terms of physical training, what do you get in boot camp?
Well, you get up like 3:30 to 4:30. You go to breakfast, and then during the day they would march you around. You'd have drill training. They'd set you in classrooms, or they'd teach you different things about weapons and that type of thing. They did a lot to keep you very tired and to keep you under control, because they didn't want you leaving. They wanted you to stay there. So they had a lot of control over you.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to break your individuality down so you'd be part of a unit. A lot of marching, a lot of drilling, a lot of classroom activities.
Okay, and then how much emphasis on discipline?
A lot, a lot. I mean, you're supposed to act as a unit, and they do everything to take away, your own individuality. They wanted you to act as a unit and work together.
What would they do with people who either pushed back or messed up?
Well, even if you didn't push back or mess up, they'd pick people out, and they'd have you do clean the barracks, clean the toilets with a toothbrush, march around a dumpster and sing "I'm a Shitbird" songs, that type of thing. Just all that kind of stuff, just to break you down.
Mm-hmm. Now, did they do things where they held an entire unit or platoon responsible for what one guy did, or?
I never experienced that
Okay.
in basic training. I didn't go through that.
Yeah, okay, it varies from where you are, but okay. Now, how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to that kind of life?
Well, again, like I said, it was unusual to start with, but I was 19 years old. I was really strong, and once I set my mind to it, it wasn't that. The physical part I could handle. I miss being home, that type of thing, but once you got past that, it was easy to handle.
Okay, so you just recognized that just doing what they told you was the simplest way forward?
Yes, I knew I had 2 years, and every day was getting shorter, so I just did what I had to do and went through with it.
All right. How long was basic training?
8 weeks.
Okay. And then you stay on for your infantry training at Fort Polk.
Yes, my infantry training was at Fort Polk, and I think that was another 8 weeks.
Yeah. And now, what does that consist of?
Well, in basic, you trained with a carbine from World War II. Then in infantry training, they gave us an M16. And it was more weapons oriented. We threw grenades and more training with the weapons.
Okay. And then, did you do extended marches or bivouacs or things like that?
And we did bivouacs, we did marches, fired a lot of different types of weapons like laws, anti-tank weapons, and that type of thing.
Okay. Now, what sort of people were training you at that time? Have they been to Vietnam?
A lot of them been to Vietnam, and of course they were drill sergeants, and most of them been to Vietnam.
Okay. Now, how much was the training there actually geared toward Vietnam?
It was, I guess it was basically all Vietnam training. I mean, we didn't have jungles to go through, but they trained you with M16. We threw grenades. I mean, it wasn't really advanced training like it is today. I mean, it's pretty, elementary, but it was geared towards Vietnam.
Okay. And did anybody tell you anything about what went on in Vietnam or what to watch out for?
Well, they do stuff like if you fall asleep in the bleachers while they're training you, and you go to Vietnam, and you're not paying attention, your day could be ruined. They didn't tell you you're going to die. They just say Charlie could ruin your day, and so you need to pay attention and listen up.
Okay. But there wasn't a lot of very specific discussion of things that happened to anybody?
No.
All right. What kind of mix of people were you training alongside, either in basic or in AIT?
It was just kids from all the United States. There were white kids, black kids, Spanish kids. Everybody's pretty much the same boat.
And range of ages?
18, 19, 20, 21, I would say would be the standard age.
And were there a few guys a little older than that?
There might have been a few kids a little older, maybe up to 23, 24, but it was generally out of high school with 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, okay. So that's another 8 weeks, and so you're finishing that, we're going to get into the fall, basically, of '69. Once you complete AIT, now what do they do with you?
Okay, they called my name out and they said you're going to go to leadership school, and that was 2 or 3 weeks, and it was at Fort Knox, Kentucky. So I said, okay, and they sent me to Kentucky.
So what did leadership school consist of?
They taught us how to drive APCs, armored personnel carriers, and that was about it.
All right. Well, what did you think of driving an APC?
It was interesting. I mean, we were in Kentucky, we'd drive it up the hills. Again, it was just, very elementary training. It wasn't advanced training. We'd just ride in and drive them a little bit, and mostly just marching around doing the same kind of things we did in AIT training.
Okay. Did you assume that maybe you'd wind up driving an APC in Vietnam, or?
Well, I thought that.
Okay.
Right. I thought that.
Okay. Now, they call it leadership training. What leadership was involved in the
None.
Okay.
None to my knowledge. I don't know what that meant. It just said you're going to leadership school. And I said, okay. And that's what we did.
All right. Now, as you go through the stages of training, the basic and the AIT and then this leadership school, does the way you are treated change? I mean, do they treat you with more respect later than earlier?
I would say basic training and infantry training were basically the same. You weren't treated with any great respect. Leadership school, it would have been a little bit better, but not real noticeable.
Okay, so you get a few weeks of that. Then what?
Then, well, they said I was going to Vietnam. I got orders to go to Vietnam, and I don't remember exactly, but I went home first for 2 or 3 weeks, and then later on, after that time frame, I went to Washington State, Fort Lewis, and flew out of there to go to Vietnam.
All right. What was your family's response to finding out you were going to Vietnam?
Well, they weren't happy about it, and they all tried to talk me out of it when I enlisted. I mean, they all sat down, and my older sister worked for an eye doctor and took me out to lunch and said, you don't want to go, you don't want to do it. Of course, I was 19, argumentative. I said, I'll be all right, no problem. Anyway, so I'm not going to Vietnam, I'm going to be a pharmacist.
Right.
So anyway.
Well, that was when you were first enlisted.
Right.
But now you've been got orders from Vietnam, and you go back home to visit.
Well, my mom was upset. She didn't want me to go, obviously. My family, my sisters didn't want me to go. They weren't telling me not to go, but I mean, they were concerned about my welfare.
Right. Now, your father had been home farming during World War II, or had he been
Yes,
in
he didn't
service?
go, but he had exemption for farming.
Right. Okay. So, all right, but now you're going, and for you at this point, it's still kind of an adventure?
It's an adventure, and not knowing what's going to happen, and not intellectually thinking through the whole process in the beginning.
Okay. So you fly out of Fort Lewis, out of Washington, and where do you stop on the way to Vietnam?
On the way to Vietnam, I think they refueled in Anchorage, Alaska. And then from there, I think we stopped one other place, I can't remember if it's Japan or not.
Sometimes it's Japan, sometimes Okinawa.
Yeah, somewhere there,
Yeah.
Okinawa or Japan, somewhere. And then we flew into Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam.
Okay. What's your first impression of Vietnam when you get there?
Well, we landed there, and there was a lot of soldiers there. And it wasn't in the middle of the war, but it was very strange, unfamiliar, and not knowing. Now I'm closer to what's going to happen, and so it's starting to sink in a little bit, but still it hasn't sunk in all the way.
Okay. What do they do with you when you get off the plane?
They put you went to barracks, and then you started going through paperwork and getting uniforms and that type of thing.
Do they do anything there to kind of get you acclimated to Vietnam?
Nothing really official to my knowledge. I think just the fact that you've been there and you're there, you're automatically getting, assimilated into the environment a little more from the climate and that type of thing.
Okay. All right. Now, do you get assigned? Now, when you went over, did you know what unit you were going to? No.
I did not know.
Okay. So you get your assignment after you get to Cam Ranh Bay.
Yes.
All right. So how long do you think you spent there?
I would say maybe a week.
Okay.
I'm not sure. A few days.
And did they give you any duties while you were there?
I don't really remember. I don't remember doing anything other than just going through different little sections and gathering stuff and getting your orders to where you're going, that type of thing. We didn't. We might have cleaned a little bit, barracks-wise, but I don't think we did any training or anything.
Okay, and training, no bunker guard at night or anything like that.
I don't remember that at Cam Ranh Bay.
Right. Okay. So now you get your assignment. Okay, and where are they? What unit are they sending you to?
101st Airborne Division.
Okay. And do you know within that what unit you will join, or is it just the division that you know at this point?
I knew nothing. I mean, I should have, or I might have known it, but they said, you're 101st and you get in this line,
Right.
and they fly you out.
Sure. Okay. And where was the 101st based at that time?
We went to Camp Evans.
Okay, and where in South Vietnam is
That'd
that?
be the I Corps, the northern section of South Vietnam.
Right. Okay. And how did they get you up there?
I believe he flew in a plane.
Okay, military transport?
Yes, military transport.
All right. And then what's at Camp Evans?
Well, it's just a base camp. That's where their headquarters were, barracks, and they had the mess halls and all the support, supply, and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. So when you get there, what do they do with you?
I sat there a few days. I don't remember, probably less than a week, and went through the same thing again. They gave me a rucksack, and I asked them, "What's this for?" And they said, "You're gonna be carrying all your food and water, everything you need, and you're gonna go out in the jungle 1 month at a time. We're gonna take you out there, then we come bring you back every 30 days for a night."
Mm-hmm.
And I did pull guard duty there.
Okay. Now, a lot of guys talk about going through something they call it CERTS training. It was the training, welcome to the 101st Airborne, for about a week. Did you get that or not?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember anything. I just remember we, again, got issued
Mm-hmm.
items. You got a weapon, and you went through that acclimation. I don't remember anything real official, but they made us pull guard duty and that type of thing.
All right. Now, at the time you got there, was your unit out in the field?
Yes,
Okay. Now, what company were you assigned to?
Alpha Company.
Of what battalion?
2nd of the 506, 101st Airborne.
Okay. And do you join them when they come back, or do they send you out?
They sent us out in a helicopter. There might have been one other person with me. I can't remember, another new person. But they just put us in a helicopter and took us out and dropped us off in the jungle.
Okay. Do you remember anything about that helicopter ride?
Sure, what am I doing?
Yeah.
They took us on the helicopter and they said, we're gonna land 3 or 4 feet off the ground, and you gotta kind of, not jump too far, but kind of step
Mhm.
off and get off, and then we're taking off right away. And so they took me out there and they dropped me, I think there was one other person, and we stepped off the helicopter and there we were.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, was your whole company there, or just part of it?
I don't remember. I think the platoon was, obviously, but I don't remember the whole company. Most of the time I was there, we were never with the company. We were basically alone.
Okay. So the platoons operated separately
Right.
most of the time.
Most of the time they operated separately.
All right. Now, where were they at that time? Just jungle someplace?
Jungle someplace. I don't know where we were.
Because they were at that time. This is like now November, December, whatever.
We were we were right around Ripcord the whole time.
Yeah.
Within striking distance.
So you're kind of in hill country or mountains.
Mountainous
sometimes,
country.
Mountains really, and near the Ashaw Valley. Not
Near it or
necessarily.
in it or
Yeah.
right on the edge or
Right.
whatever.
Okay. Once you joined them, what kinds of things do you start to do?
Well, I really didn't know what to do. I mean, we weren't formally. We didn't have that kind of training.
Mm-hmm.
So they let us off, and I don't really know what we're supposed to do. And I think my platoon leader at that time came up and introduced himself and said, "You're going to be in this squad," and I just got in that squad and did whatever they told me to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, did anybody in the squad kind of make an effort to explain to you how things work, or did they just say, "Follow us, do what we do"?
Yeah, there was no explanation about anything. They didn't tell me anything. I didn't really know where I could have been in Laos, Cambodia, or I had no idea where I was at. They flew us out there. No information was given to us about anything.
All right. And then how long did you stay out in the field before you came back in?
It was 30 days at a time. I don't remember the first time what part of the cycle I was in. It could have been there 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
But it was a while before you
It was
came
many
back.
days, yes.
Okay. And I guess, and so physically, what are you doing that first few weeks?
Well, when you're there, they would walk you around. You'd get up, put on your rucksack, and you take off down the trails. They'd mark. You would go certain areas. You may go walk all day, walk half a day, and you'd set up camp again, set up a perimeter, and they just moved you around. Sometimes you'd stay in a spot 3 or 4 days a week. Sometimes you'd move every day.
Okay. Would you use the trails?
We used trails, and a lot of times we didn't use trails. We'd have to hack through the jungle, through the brush and the briar, and it'd rip your arms up, and jungle rot, and you'd be bleeding, and it was very hot, and we were carrying. They gave me a M79 to carry because I was a little bigger than some of them, and you had to carry that with all the ammo. So they took my M16 away.
Okay.
That was a lot of weight.
And that's a grenade launcher.
Grenade launcher.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got that, you've got water, you've got food, and all of that. So you're heavily laden, stomping through the jungle like this. Now, on that first time out, did you have any contact with the enemy?
The first week, I don't believe so.
Okay. In general, was there much going on out there at that time?
I'm going to say during my whole time there, 80% of the time, nothing went on.
Mm-hmm.
It was just those times when it went on, it went on.
Yeah.
And it was usually brief moments, you know, it could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but it was like constant ambush.
Mm-hmm. So that was always something that could happen to you, and you just
Right.
don't know when. Okay. About how large was your platoon at that time, do you think?
I would say maybe 20.
Okay, so well below whatever its paper strength would be.
Right, way below.
Okay. So you're out there for a while. How long did it take you to kind of adjust or get used to being in the field?
Well, I'm a very adaptable person, and I can block stuff out real well.
Mhm.
So I kind of blocked it out. I know I was there. I knew I was there, but I was able to kind of put it in a compartment.
Mhm.
So I think I adjusted real well. The physical thing was a little different. Yeah, it was real strenuous in the mountains, carrying all that weight. But after a few days, you got used to it, and you were able to deal with it. But the first week or so, it was interesting.
Mm-hmm. But by the time you get back to Camp Evans, you've sort of learned the ropes pretty much.
Yes.
At least in terms of marching around and being
Right.
out in the jungle.
You learned the ropes.
Okay. Now, what kinds of rules did your platoon have in terms of just how it behaved itself in the field? It could be light or noise or march deployment, or were there things they did to try to protect themselves?
Certainly, we were very quiet. If someone raised their voice, even if it was a whisper, it would make people nervous sometimes. They'd always tell you, keep it down.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the biggest thing, noise. Then we had guard duty at night. And of course, that was very important. You had to keep awake and pay attention. And overall, I think everybody did a good job with that discipline part of that.
Okay. Now, would they smoke in the field?
Yes, they definitely smoked.
Okay. And what did you do at night? If you're smoking, you can see a cigarette.
Well, most people, once it got dark, you know, you didn't stay awake very long.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure there's a few people that smoked. If you did, you'd cup your cigarette.
Yeah.
Or if you're in a foxhole, you'd be in the foxhole cupping it.
Mm-hmm.
But usually, after marching all day, if that's what you did when it got night, there was no reason to keep awake because you had no lights, you weren't reading, you weren't doing anything. So sleep was something you would do.
Okay. Now, so initially you're out in the mountains and jungle and so forth. Do you spend some time in the lowlands area or the area closer to Camp Evans?
I don't believe we've ever was in the lowlands. I think I was in the jungle and the mountains the whole time.
Okay. Because different parts of the battalion did different things at that time, and C Company was in the lowlands for a while and so forth. So but it's also just what do you remember?
Right.
So, okay, so that's where that comes from. Okay, so basically it's just now, when you go back to base camp, what do you do?
Well, they fly you back. You go back to these screened-in barracks. They had a metal roof screen. They had cots in there. You could take a shower. You could go eat, drink beer if you wanted to, and they give you new clothes, new fatigues,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next day you go back on.
Okay. Now, do you know who your company commander was when you got there?
No,
Okay. Did you ever know who your company commander was?
not really.
Okay. Because A Company eventually, Chuck Hawkins.
Chuck Hawkins. I remember when he came, but before that, when I got there, I don't remember who the.
Yeah. And a lot of the time you're up, you wouldn't even have your company commander with you.
No, because we were hardly with the company.
Yeah, you're in platoons, and so you just see who you see. Do you remember who your platoon leader was?
Yeah, Lee.
Okay. Now, did he become platoon leader?
He was out there when I first got there. There was another gentleman there, and I can't remember his name,
Okay.
but Lee came.
So you got Lee Wicheskog coming in, I guess early in 1970.
69.
60.
No, 70.
70, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Now, do you remember the first time or any of the early times when you did make contact with the enemy?
Yes.
Okay, can you just talk about what happened?
The first time, I think we were just we were walking down the trails, and there was contact, and we all got down, got behind logs or whatever. It lasted 5 minutes. It was over.
Mm-hmm.
It was scary, but we survived.
Okay. Now, when the first shots rang out, I mean, did you just do what you were trained to do, or did you just do what the guys did?
You did what everybody else did, but they took my M16 away from me, so
Mm-hmm.
it's not like I'm firing at anybody.
Yeah.
I'm behind it. I'm with a grenade launcher, which is good for something. I don't know what, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not good for protecting yourself.
Right. So, and it wasn't at that point. You don't even don't know what to shoot it at.
There's nothing to shoot at, because
Yeah.
most of the time it's just like you're walking through the jungle, it's hit and run. No one sees anybody until it's too late, unless there's a real ambush set up. So that's usually what was going on. Not actual ambushes, just accidentally running across people.
Right. Okay. And when you're moving around in the jungle, did you have a regular spot in line?
No, in the platoon, one squad would walk first.
Mm-hmm.
Next time another squad would go first, and within that squad, they'd rotate walking point.
Okay. Now, with a grenade launcher, did you walk point?
No, I didn't have to walk point because it was no good. But I did walk point twice. But
Okay. Now,
normally you don't.
okay. Now, did you do that still carrying the grenade launcher, or did you borrow an
No.
M16?
No, I got someone. I was very lucky. Someone would donate their M16 so I could walk point.
Lucky you. All right. Did you notice over the course of it, you've got this period of several months here strung together where you're kind of regularly out there in the jungle, did the level of activity change?
The level of activity changed.
Okay, so how early did you start to notice that?
I would say April, end of March,
Mm-hmm.
April, it started picking up a lot. Because the first 2 or 3 months, it was a lot of card playing, walking and card playing, and not sensing a lot of danger. Knowing it's there, but not really, for me, not sensing it.
Right. Now, your company was the first one that was sent out to try to establish what will become Firebase Ripcord. Were you with them when they did that?
I was with them when they went to Ripcord.
Okay. Because the initial effort was in the middle of March, like the 12th or something like that, or 16th, but there. So you're with them with that.
Yes.
What do you remember about that day?
Well, I remember they were going to fly us out, and they took a couple of helicopters out, and then they stopped it. So I think they said they were under attack, and they couldn't land.
So your helicopter didn't land?
Or didn't even take off.
Okay. You're just waiting for something to
Right.
happen, and then something else happened. Okay. So that was sort of a non-starter for you. You're not
Right.
in one of the helicopters that did
Right.
try to land there. Okay. So at that point, then, you're just kind of patrolling the hills and valleys around Ripcord much of the time.
Right,
Okay.
walking through the mountains.
Yeah. Did your company have a turn on top of Ripcord defending it?
Yes, we were there, and I don't remember how long, but it was a short period of time, maybe a week. We weren't there very long.
All right. And sort of what was the setup there? What did it look like to you?
It was just a dirt hill, nothing there, and there was a bunker set up, and people were constantly working on digging them out, filling sandbags, and just that type of thing.
Okay. At the time you were there, was there much incoming fire, or was it pretty
I
quiet?
did not notice anything.
Yeah. Because the last several weeks they're essentially under siege, but you're out in the field when all that
Correct.
stuff's happening. Okay. Now, did you think, eventually your unit gets into a major firefight at the very end of the Ripcord campaign, but I guess prior to that, did you have any kind of more extended firefights, or were your contacts always very brief?
They were always very brief, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and they were over with.
Okay. Do you remember, were you aware of things going on around you? Were things happening to other units? Could you hear stuff?
Well, I don't know if they talked about it and I didn't pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember, Company C and all this, I didn't know the troubles that everybody was, I didn't know really what was going on elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember them talking about it or telling us.
Right.
They may have, and I just don't remember.
Now, could you see or hear any signs of fighting going on in other places? Could you observe anything at night or hear artillery going off or that sort of stuff?
Right, the biggest thing I remember was when they shot the Chinook down.
Mm-hmm.
We were out we'd left the day or the day before, I can't remember, left Ripcord, and we were walking outside the perimeter. We could hear the 51 caliber shoot. We saw the Chinook, and we could hear the fighting. We saw it fall out of the sky.
Yeah. So there, and then the whole artillery battery ammunition blows up.
It blows up and blows the guns off the side. It's spectacular.
Okay. Now, latter part of the campaign, we're now into July now of 1970 with this, and your company, and I think you are kind of working as a company now, where the platoons are pretty much together. They're still operating as platoons, but closer together.
Yeah, we're closer together.
Yeah. Okay. And they get into some trouble. What do you remember about the last few days out in the field?
Are you referring to the very last day, or?
Well, we've got there are things that lead into that.
Well,
So, what do you recall?
Well, I remember after what we were just talking about, the Chinook getting shot down, from that point on, it was pretty hairy. There was a lot of different things going on.
Some part of your company ran across an enemy communication line that you were tapping into. Did you know that was happening, or was that a different platoon?
Well, I think our platoon, and the reason I know this is from watching the DVD. Because at that time I didn't know that was even going on. I didn't know they found that communication line. And I remember Lee saying in the movie that they set back in the documentary that they set Sparky back on the trail with somebody else, and they killed an NVA soldier. Then they found out they had the plans on for a ripcord and that type of thing. But I didn't even know that.
You didn't know any of those things.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, until Lee called me, I didn't know I was at the Shaw Valley. I didn't know I was even on the edge of Shaw Valley, because I remember landing in Cameron Bay, and they said, "You don't want to go there, it's a really bad place. You want to stay away from there." I said, "Okay, I'm not going." And I didn't even know I was there.
Yeah. Okay. So you have a general sense that there's stuff going on, and this is getting trickier. When you were going out on the trails, would you see, and this could even be before this, what indications did you have that the enemy were out there?
Well, we had little small firefights. We found bunkers. There was you could tell there was a lot of activity going on. I mean, you could see that there's been MVA there, that type of thing.
Okay. Now, did you have any Vietnamese with you?
We had a scout with us.
Okay. And what was his function?
He would walk. He would kind of like a guide type person.
And what could he give you that you couldn't do for yourselves?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because some of it's sort of potentially looking for booby traps or signs of the enemy or that kind
Where
of
we were at, there was a lot of booby traps, because where we were at, there was no civilian population. There was no Viet Cong. It was all North Vietnamese Army. And they did set up a lot of booby traps, to my knowledge.
And they were using the trails.
They were using the trails. I mean, we would walk high, and they would normally walk low. And so we kind of avoided each other unless it was crossing route. So we knew they were down in the valleys, and they knew we were up higher on the ridge lines.
Okay. Now, in the course of the months of wandering around the hills before the last couple of days, did you ever have occasion to actually use the grenade launcher?
I never used it in a battle, but they would have me, like, we're going to leave a perimeter to set a couple rounds off, just to, but other than that, it wasn't fired very much.
Yeah, that's sort of nothing to shoot at.
There was nothing to shoot at, and, it's not, would not have been my weapon of choice.
And so did you wonder at some point why you even had it?
Yeah, and I finally asked Lee, can I get a 45, a side weapon, so I could have some kind of protection. Finally, supply. I think they brought me one out about June. I finally got one.
Okay. So now we're going to go back sort of those, I guess, and before that final firefight that you're in, are there other particular things that happened out in the field that kind of stand out in your memory?
Yes, I remember might have been another platoon got in trouble and someone got wounded. We had to go back and help him. We had to carry the guy up the mountainside. He got shot up in the legs real bad, and we pulled him up, and then they couldn't get him out, medevaced him, because it got real foggy like it tends to do, and the helicopters couldn't come in, and he died overnight. So I remember that. Then they sent us out, and there were some GIs that were killed previously. I don't know if it was, I don't know anything about them, but we had to go get them. There was, I don't remember, 3 or 4 of them. We went and gathered them up.
Yeah. Now, was your own platoon taking casualties at that point, or were you still pretty much intact?
But no, there was a couple of people got hurt. I can't remember this name. We were walking down a trail one day, and I think that was my first 30 days there. One of the guys got shot in the butt. You know, there was a few things like that. We got in a little small firefight before. I don't remember what month it was, and the Cobra helicopters came in. And of course, they shot their little rockets on us. That was the first time I got hurt, so I had shrapnel at my legs. Minor shrapnel, it wasn't serious. I had books in my pockets, and they had little holes in them. And I got shrapnel on my back, and that was the first time I went to the hospital ship in Da Nang.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about that then. So you get hit by friendly fire shrapnel. So they put you in a medevac, and what's the process?
They took me into Da Nang, then they took me out in the hospital, Navy hospital ship. So I don't remember how long I was there, maybe 7 days, 10 days, and I wasn't really hurt. I mean, I could walk, and so they had me help. And there was a lot of kids on there that was really hurt from shrapnel, where they, you know, they had big V's cut up their legs, and they had cloth in there, and they couldn't sew them up. So I'd go around with them, and I'd help them. You know, they gave me something to do. So.
Yeah. And was it in some ways a relief to go back to your unit, or?
Never. Okay. It wasn't a relief to go back.
All right.
I missed the food. On the hospital ship, they were eating lobsters and steaks.
Yeah, well, it's the Navy, but okay. So now, I guess, did you ever get an R&R?
No. We went, well, I shouldn't say that. We went to Eagle Beach for several days. The whole company did, everybody did. So I never went on my R&R, my personal R&R.
Right.
I wasn't there long. I got wounded, medevaced out before.
Yeah, because you actually got there in February and you're hit in July.
July.
Yeah, okay. All right. So, okay, so that kind of gets us back there again. All right, so you've been wounded, you've come back, and then you're with the unit for quite some time again before the final fight. Okay, so now what do you remember sort of about like July 22nd, 23rd?
Well, I remember the company met up on, I guess, the 21st, and we set up perimeter, and there was a lot of talking about a lot of trouble, activity, and we had a lot of outposts set up, and I could hear there was a lot of chatter and a lot of noise. You could just feel it. You could taste it. You could tell that there was something, you know, you could just gut feeling that there was stuff going on. And then that was July 21st, and on the 22nd in the morning we moved out.
Okay. And what starts to happen?
Well, it was Alpha's company. It was our platoon and Alpha company turn to walk point. And so it was our squad turn to walk point, and so they came up to me and said, "You're walking point." I said, "What about this?" "No problem. Here, M16. So they took my grenade launcher and gave me the M16. Then I was walking point, and a gentleman named Dees, he walked slack behind me, and then we took off, and the whole company left.
Okay. How far do you get?
Not very far. I was walking up the trail on an incline, and I only walked point once before, and I was slouching. I had my gun ready, and I'm walking up the trail, and I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I don't remember. And it happened real fast, and I thought I saw someone sitting on the trail. I didn't shoot because I didn't know. It was a shock to my system. This is all going on within a billionth of a second.
Right.
And the Vietnamese guy saw me at the same time I saw him, and he got up and left. He ran. And then I told my slack man to get down. I waved down, and then he came up to me, wanted to know what was going on. He said there was someone sitting there, and then we waved everybody to get down, and then we saw movement on both sides, and so we got behind it. Him and I got behind this big tree, and I don't know what hit the tree, RPG, grenade, satchel charge, but the whole tree shook, and my eardrum was blown out, and the slack man with me got a little piece of shrapnel in his ankle because he grabbed his ankle and he yelled. And that happened, and we were there for a few minutes, and we decided we're going back with the rest of our squad platoon, and we backed down the hill a little bit, and that's when everything started.
Okay. So, now what happens next?
It was like watching Saving Private Ryan when they hit the beaches. It was all white and like no sound, and there was grenades coming in, going out, satchel charges coming in, machine gun fire, the leaves, the trees above us, the bullets coming in were shaking. Our platoon was the first platoon. We were up the hill farther. Back at the end of our platoon, the company got overran, which I didn't know at the time, but we got cut off. We had no radio, and we were isolated. I thought we were all going to die. Trees, the leaves were falling, the ground was shaking, people were getting shot, wounded.
Okay. And so what are you doing during all that time?
Well, we're all in a circle,
Okay.
in a perimeter, and I'm moving around because I'm not comfortable. We're throwing grenades over the side. These kids are throwing grenades, they're hitting the trees, bouncing back. I mean, it's just solid jungle. And so there was shooting, I kept moving. I'd shoot and then move because I wasn't happy being where I was. And one of the times I was moving, I put my M16 in my left hand, I started to move, and a satchel charge came in and blew my helmet off. I never saw it again. And I had my M16 like that, and it was just a barrel. It disintegrated all the plastic off.
Okay, so the stock's blown off.
It's gone, yeah. So I don't remember, but I got another M16 because there were a couple laying around, and I didn't have a helmet, and that was.
Okay. Now, could you see anything to shoot at?
I was at the highest point probably, and so I had the steepest angle, so I had less. I personally didn't have much. As you went down the hill, the ground flattened off, and a lot of people were shooting ducks in at the carnival or something. But all you could do is throw stuff. You could throw grenades off the top. I could hear them because they were yelling back "Kurahi, Kurahi" at us, and I remember that. But I couldn't see too many.
The Vietnamese were yelling Kurahi at you?
Yeah.
Okay.
They were yelling Kurahi.
All right. Now, did you have? Had anyone positioned you up there in the hilltop, or did you just kind of happen to be there, and so that's what you were doing?
Yeah, we just got in a circle protection.
Okay.
That's what we do.
So there's a ring, and so you're on like the perimeter of a circle.
We're on a ridge.
You're in one section, but you're just on the highest piece.
Yes, I was up on the highest piece.
Okay. Now, do you recall getting any kind of air or artillery support?
Oh yeah. I don't remember the artillery because we couldn't radio because we had no radio.
Yeah.
And we're all kind of looking at each other, and I remember seeing Lee looking at him, and his eyes are like this, we're like, what's going on here? But finally, the airstrike, I think that they got I think the two radios were shot at, and the one didn't work, the third one didn't work, and eventually they got it to work. And they called in the airstrikes. I remember the airstrikes, I don't remember artillery. Not saying we didn't get it or didn't get it, but I don't remember. And they called in the airstrikes, and I could see the jets coming in, and I could see the bombs coming down. I mean, they were so close, the wings weren't even opening up. They were just, you could watch it, and then it was just nothing. I mean, the trees disappeared. It was like a movie. You looked up, and the trees were just flying through the air. So the shrapnel from the bombs blew everything away. I mean, it blew the top of the trees off. It was just defoliage and everything.
Now, did the enemy back off after that?
Yeah, they backed off.
So it starts to kind of quiet down. Now, had you been hit at this point?
I didn't know it, but I had a bullet wound or shrapnel through my buttocks, hip. I didn't know it. I had no idea. I couldn't hear because the rocket or whatever hit the tree, took my eardrums, and they threw the satchel charge. It did them again or whatever. I couldn't. It was just a solid ring. I couldn't hear anything. But I didn't know I was hurt.
At what point did you find out you were hurt?
Well, the next day when Delta Company came and got us out, and we went back to base camp, Camp Evans. There was a lot of people really hurt. I mean, obviously, I mean, really bad injuries. And they took care of them. They asked me what's wrong with me, and I said, well, I can't hear. I said, you'll be all right. And they sent me back to the barracks. And then a couple hours later, I started getting the temperature, and I started shaking and getting real hot and sweaty. And so I went back down, and they examined me. I had an infection.
Okay. So you weren't bleeding out of the wound that you took. It just a piece stuck itself inside you.
It's made a little L rip in my pants. I didn't know it. Never felt it.
Okay. To back up a little bit, so you're in an extended fight during the day on the 22nd, but they can't get you out that night.
Can't get us out.
So what happened during that night?
When it was over, I think it was late afternoon. It was finally over. Well, we had to set up a perimeter. So we set up a perimeter and did the best we could and got ready for the night because they thought we were going to get hit again at night, but nothing really happened. So we set up the perimeter. The next morning we got up and Delta Company came in and got us out.
And do you remember, because you couldn't hear anything, so there was a lot of stuff going on because they were evacuating Ripcord at that point and a lot of shooting and things going on, but in your particular part of the world, did it seem relatively quiet?
Yeah, it was quiet. For us, it was quiet. I didn't know we were the last company of the 101st in the jungle. I didn't know we were evacuating Ripcord. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I didn't know any of this stuff until Lee called me. You know, I did not know. I did not know any of this. Was I supposed to know? I don't think so. I don't think they were telling me. I didn't know. I had no idea. If I knew the last company in the jungle, I might have been nervous. But we didn't know that. I didn't know it. They just send you someplace and you go, and that's it.
And all of a sudden, and you hadn't had a lot of really extended firefights before that either.
Not a long time, just short little burst, and it was my whole experience was that way. Just hit and run.
Okay. Now, I guess during that night, I mean, did they provide illumination for you? Was there that you can recall? Could you see anything?
I don't know. I didn't see anything. I don't remember. I just remember I went to sleep just like I did every night. I mean, I probably should have been more scared than I was, but not knowing what was going on. I mean, I didn't know we were attacked by a battalion. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know. So, typical 20-year-old.
All right. So we've gotten you back to Camp Evans initially, and now that you've got the fever, they realize you've been hit. Now what happens to you?
Well, I spent the night there, and their hospital setting. Then they sent me to Da Nang, put me in the hospital in Da Nang. My fever is getting worse. But, you know, they said I could go eat in the cafeteria, and I tried to get up. I walked 20 feet, and I couldn't walk anymore. And so they said, all right, come out. They got me back in bed, and then they flew me to Japan. So I went to the hospital in Japan.
And how long did you stay there?
2 or 3 weeks, maybe.
Okay. Now, did they notify people at home that you'd been hit?
Yes.
Okay. And how did they do that?
I don't know. I think they sent a telegram.
Okay.
Something like that.
Because I guess the stories, of course, the telegrams come when people have been killed, rather than.
Well, I know they did one the first time they sent the telegram because I got it. My mom gave it to me, so I think the second time they might have did the same thing.
Right.
But I didn't tell my mom any of this, so I'm telling her everything's good, and she's getting the telegram in the hospital.
Yeah. So you're actually writing home from the hospital and saying everything's fine?
Yeah, I didn't tell her anything.
Okay. Now, how long had it taken to figure out that you actually had been hit, as opposed to just having a miscellaneous fever?
Well,
or did they figure that out back at Evans, or?
Well, I don't remember. Well, I think they found out I had a hole in my pants, and we figured out what was going on.
Okay.
Because like I said, I didn't know it even happened.
So the part where you couldn't walk, that wasn't?
Just fever.
That was just fever.
Just fever.
Okay.
It had nothing to do with the physical part of the injury. It was just the complications from it.
Okay.
I was lucky, very lucky.
Okay, so you're a few weeks in Japan, and were you stuck in bed the whole time, or could you eventually get out and go move around?
Well, we went downtown Tokyo.
Okay.
So we were in there, and we went to something called the American Club, and there was American college girls there, and we went down there and all sat in our pajamas at this club and had conversation. And then after that, I got clothes, and we went downtown Tokyo.
Okay. Now, at this point, would you be better and they'd send you out in the field, or what happens next?
Well, once I went to Japan, I was done.
Okay.
I was done with Vietnam. So they don't send you back. When I was in the hospital in Da Nang, the doctor said, "You want to go back? You've been wounded twice." I said, "No, I do not want to go back." He said, "We don't have to."
Okay.
And they said, "We're going to send you to Japan."
All right. Where do you go from Japan?
From Japan, we flew in, I think, California somewhere, then I went home for a couple of weeks, and then after that they stationed me in Fort Carson, Colorado.
Okay. Now, when you flew out of Japan, were you on a military flight or?
Probably not. I think it was, when I flew there, I know it was like Pan Am or some big commercial jet, and I think I went home in a big commercial jet.
Okay. But are these ones chartered by the military?
Yes.
That's all.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And where did you land in the States?
I think I landed in California.
Okay, so maybe Oakland, San Francisco, or
Let's see. I came back to Washington.
okay, so Fort Lewis again,
Yeah.
and Seattle, Tacoma. All right. Now, when people come back from Vietnam, they get off the plane. Then, what do they do with you?
Well, I was there. I don't know how long I was there. I was there maybe just a couple, 3 or 4 days.
Right.
Then.
But I mean, do you get new uniforms or other things
Well,
happening?
You're wearing, you're in Army. You're wearing Army fatigues. I don't remember doing anything. I mean,
Okay.
I wasn't in a unit doing anything. I don't remember that.
Well, but because a lot of people talk about it as sort of that's their last stop before they're out of the Army.
Yeah. Well, that was just a stopover until I went home for
Right.
a little bit of leave. Then I got stationed in Fort
Okay.
Carson.
Now, when you're being sent home on leave, did they warn you at all about anti-war protesters or anything like that? Or did you
No,
see
I knew all about it because my friends were all in college, and they were doing all that stuff.
Okay.
And so,
And so, did you run into any trouble on your way home?
no. I mean, we weren't respected or liked, I can tell you that. Only people who came up to talk to was like girls at the airport, that charged money. I mean,
Oh.
people avoided you. It's not like today where you see people in uniform and people come up, pat them on the back and say, "Good job." So, we weren't respected very well.
Okay. Now, where do they send you to finish out your enlistment?
At Fort Carson,
Okay.
Colorado.
And what are you doing there?
They put me in an armored unit, which I had a profile. Since my eardrums were broke, I couldn't be around a lawnmower because it was too noisy. So they put me in an armored unit, and
Aren't armored units kind of noisy?
they were real noisy. In fact, I couldn't leave the barracks, and so I had a profile, and my back was hurt, and I had a profile. I couldn't lift anything over 20 pounds, and I couldn't be around any noise. So I sat the rest of my time in the barracks in Fort Carson. They made me a utility officer, which would be someone that would fix a broken window if one ever broke. And so I did nothing until I got out of the Army in May. I did absolutely nothing. I did guard duty every night,
Okay.
but I did nothing.
So how did you kill your time?
It was very boring. I watched The Dating Game on TV, stuff like that.
Wow. All right. So when do you get discharged?
I got an early out May to go to college. They gave me a 3-month early out, so I spent 21 months in the Army.
Okay. And now that you are out, do you go back to college?
Yes, I went to University of Iowa for 3 years, and I graduated.
Was this less boring than college had been before, or?
Well, I appreciated things. I appreciated sidewalks, because I'm walking down the sidewalk. I say, "Wow, this is amazing." I just walk down the sidewalk, and there's no trails, no one's trying to kill you. It was interesting.
Okay. Did you have difficulty sort of adjusting to be in civilian life again?
Well, probably a little bit, but not really, because, like I say, all my friends, regardless what they thought about the war, they liked me.
Okay. So they were still your friends after
Oh,
that?
absolutely. Even more so. Even though they didn't like the war, they were amazed that I went. So they heard war stories from people, and they heard I got hurt twice, so they were extra nice. So I didn't, with my friends and family, I never experienced that. Other people that I didn't know going through airports, a little bit, but.
Okay. I mean, was there much anti-war activity on the campus?
Not when I got there. because it was not much going on
Mhm.
as far as that goes. Not in Iowa.
Yeah.
Not in Iowa.
Okay. Did that change over time?
It never got worse. My whole 3 years there, it was more before, I think.
Okay. Now, I guess your friends talked to you at least a little bit about Vietnam and so forth. Um, did you talk much to anybody else, or just?
I didn't really talk about it, and it probably wasn't because I couldn't or
Mhm.
I didn't want it. I just, when you're talking about it, it sounds like you're bragging or,
Mm-hmm.
I was in Vietnam and we were,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to do that. My brother-in-law, I sold insurance when I graduated from college. And my brother-in-law, he would ask me about it because we'd be in hotel rooms, out of town, and he'd want to know about it. So I'd tell him, what happened, and we were cut off, our platoon was cut off, we were ambushed, and our radio was shot, and I was walking point, and all this.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh my God," you're going over, talking about it. But other than that, I didn't really talk about it much. And again, it wasn't because I couldn't.
Mhm.
It was just, what was the point?
Yeah. No particular reason to.
No.
Did you pay much attention to the course of the war after you got back?
Not a lot. I knew it existed, but it didn't really only went on for another 2 or 3 years after I
Yeah.
got
When
back.
we were there, our last ground troops came out in early '73. So.
Yeah, and I knew it was, the war was, when we were there, we knew it was going bad.
Mhm.
We knew it wasn't going our way, and there was no point to it. Why go there and die for nothing? They're not fighting for anything.
Okay. Now, during the time that you were actually in Vietnam, you're essentially in the field the whole time.
Yes.
You're not in civilian areas at all.
No.
You're not spending much of any time on base camps and
No.
things like that. Now, there are certain stereotypes about Vietnam that probably don't fit your story that well, and one of them would have to do with drug use, for instance. Were you aware of any of that?
Only time you would ever get any drugs was if you're in a base camp.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're growing a marijuana plant in your helmet. I mean, when you went, I'm sure there was some marijuana in Ripcord. I would not partake in it. I wanted to come home alive. Excuse me, I wanted my senses as sharp as possible.
Right.
I don't think I drank 5 beers the whole time I was there. So that's not something I'd want to do.
Yeah. It's just not part of that world. Now, did you see any sign of racial tension while you were there?
Not really. Not really. I mean, there was a few black people in our unit, and a couple of them were grumbling. They didn't like it. It's a white man's war. Minor stuff, but nothing.
But they did their jobs, and
They did their jobs.
Yeah.
They did their jobs.
now, how do you characterize sort of morale in your platoon overall?
I think it was okay. I mean, I can't compare it to any other war or anything, but I think it was okay. I mean, most of them didn't want to be there, but they wanted to stay alive, so they wanted everybody to do their job.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did your job, your friend had a better chance of living, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was that kind of respect,
Right.
Keep the noise down, do your job, let's get out of here.
So it's still functioning effectively.
Yes, it's functioning. I mean, people would try to get out of the field, they get a sore ear or something, they try to do that, which is understandable. But overall, everybody was working together for one common goal.
Okay. So to go back, you're out of Vietnam, so you start initially selling insurance. I mean,
No, I get out of Vietnam, I go back to college for
Yeah,
3 years.
right.
After college, I got my liberal arts degree and I didn't know what to do. My brother-in-law says, well, him and his best friend had a little insurance agency and they were selling like a Medicare supplement insurance in Nebraska. And so why don't you do that? So I did that for like a couple of years, 2 years.
And then what comes after that?
Then I went to work for another company, which I didn't like. Then after that, I've been self-employed all my life.
And what kind of work do you do?
Well, I've done it all. I've done accounting. I've done a lot of real estate. Today I run a post-secondary school. So I've always been on my own. I like it.
To look back at sort of the time you spent in the service, how do you think that affected you positively or negatively?
Well, I mean, I didn't like the service, to be honest. I didn't like going to Vietnam, but it's part of me. Can't change it. It probably helped make me who I am today.
So is there a positive angle to it?
I think so. I mean, you had other people, you had to rely on each other, taught you responsibility. I mean, it's a tough way to learn it, right? It's not something I want my kids to go through, but something we did, and I wouldn't change it.
All right. Well, thank you for making the effort to come out and share a story today.
I'm glad to. It feels good.